Just a reminder, you can catch me recording this podcast live on AMP. AMP is a new live radio app that lets you call in and chat with me in person while recording. Get the app on Apple's App Store and make sure you follow me at John Middlecoff to get notified when I go live. What is going on, everybody? John Middlecoff, 3 and Out podcast. Make sure you subscribe wherever you may listen, as well as this YouTube page. Hammer that like button, subscribe to our page, and even leave a comment below in the description. TheVolume.com. Check out the merch page. Order yourself a good-looking hat. Cannot recommend it enough. We got some 3 and Out merch as well. We officially have passed the franchise tag deadline, and the running backs are all unsigned when it comes to a long-term contract. It looks like Tony Pollard, Cowboys running back, will be the only guy who signs his franchise tag as of right now. So we will dive into all of that, as well as some thoughts on the quarterback docu-series, including Kirk Cousins, and something Dak Prescott said today about interceptions that I wanted to dive into in relationship to Cousins. But before we dive into football, can I tell you about my friends at Game Time? Here's what I need you to do. I need you to grab your smartphone. I need you to go to the App Store. Download the Game Time app. They're the official ticketing app of this podcast. And for a reason, because they're the best ticketing app in America. Do you want to go to a football game this fall? College football. SEC media days are going on. You live in the South? You want to go watch LSU? You want to go watch Georgia? You want to go watch Alabama? I got you covered. NFL? You want to go to a baseball game? Your team in the playoff mix? Download the Game Time app. Use the promo code JOHN. That's just my name, JOHN, and get $20 off your first pair of tickets, as well as concerts and comedy shows. They have you covered with everything. JOHN is the promo code. $20 off. Tell your friends. I want you sharing it with your friends. You guys want to go to games. You want to go to events. You want to go to anything. Get out of the house. Have some fun. Do it on us here at 3 and Out. Promo code JOHN, JOHN, 3 and Out, 20% off. Excuse me, $20 off. Appreciate you, everyone that has used it. Let's start with the news of the day. The franchise tag deadline has officially came and went, and I think it played out the way those of us with common sense thought it would. Tony Pollard, there wasn't much question he wasn't going to get a long-term extension with the Cowboys. They had just gone down that road with Ezekiel Elliott, which I saw a headline today. He will not be back on the team. That ship has sailed. But Pollard is the only one of the 3 running backs who were still, fighting for a long-term contract, who is going to sign the franchise tag and will play for a little over $10 million, fully guaranteed in 2023. And then you have Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs, 2 former first-round picks who are, think they are worthy of a long-term contract extension, and their franchises thought otherwise. Let's start with the New York Giants. I think this shows you and puts into light why it is so important as a new GM and a new head coach to have early success. Because the amount of money these coaches make, I don't care who you are. Jonathan Gannon just bought a $10 million home. So when I sign a new coach with 0 resume as a head coach, he's still making $7-8 million a year. Well, that's just the going rate for a coach. But to have actual juice inside my building, you have to have success on the field. Well, the Giants had become a laughingstock. They were a joke. I mean, they had gone through one of the most embarrassing 4-year stretches in recent memory in the franchise, capped off by the last, I would say, 18 months of Joe Judge. It was really bad. So when these guys come in, immediately get them to over 500, not just in the playoffs, but winning a playoff game, it gives them equity and honestly pull with John Mara, who I wouldn't call an historic meddler, but they have been very, very loyal to, quote unquote, their guys. And it's hard to talk them off when they want to do something. Well, Joe Schoen, who came from Buffalo, who was clearly having a lot of success, and Brian Daboll, who's been around Saban and Belichick, kind of knows something about value. You can't convince me. Clearly, they like Saquon Barkley. He is probably, if not the most talented, top 2 or 3 most talented player on the team. You want him on your squad. But there's an economic value to this. You're not going to give him $40 or $50 million. That's crazy business, especially when you factor in all the injuries. Well, I would say a year ago, let's say a guy like Joe Judge had been the head coach. Let's say a guy like Pat Shurmur had been a head coach. Saquon Barkley would have a long-term contract extension right now. But when you have early success, you saw it with Sean McVay. He won immediately, got him to the playoffs. Moving forward, like anything he wanted to do, they did. Look at Mike Vrabel. A lot of early success. Anything Mike Vrabel wants, he's going to get. Kyle Shanahan, it took him a couple years, but once he got to the Super Bowl, got extended, and anything he wants, he gets. Once the owner has faith that he has a good coach and good management in place, that's why he's paying you to make these decisions. Usually when you get the meddler type owners, Jerry's unique because he's also the GM. It's when they don't totally trust the GM or the coach. Think about anyone in any profession. When your boss doesn't trust you, he's probably more likely to micromanage. Once you prove yourself in any position, great sales guy, great coder, great, you name it, you are much more likely to have more pull and honestly be given the leeway and the room to make decisions on your own because you prove that you can benefit said organization, said company. And that's what I think Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen did immediately with the Giants. They just know what they're doing. They're competent professionals. Now, Brian Daboll wins Coach of the Year immediately. It's not like he won 14 games, but given how crappy they had been, to me, it was a no-brainer because I still don't feel they have that much talent. And we can argue till we're blue in the face about the quarterback and whether they handled this whole situation wrong. What I would have done personally is I would have let them both hit the free agent market. Who's paying Saquon Barkley a lot of money? Newsflash, nobody. Who would have paid Daniel Jones that much money? I don't think anyone. I do understand why it's not worth the risk for them to play that game. Now, did they ultimately have to give him as much as they did? Well, I would say probably not, but they did. But the quarterback position, we all know, is number one on the hierarchy of importance. And I understand, I saw Schefter just Instagram something about Derrick Henry, who's kind of pissed off. He's like, what's the point of our value? Do we mean nothing? And I get from his point of view, from a lot of these guys that are very productive. Austin Eckler has been very outspoken. Why I'm paid like a third wide receiver on a lot of these teams. It sucks, but it is the reality of the business you are in. It really is. And, there's not necessarily a solution, but from a team's perspective, this is good business. This is the healthy way to operate. From the player, I understand if they were an offensive tackle or they were a defensive tackle or clearly a quarterback or wide receiver, they would get broken off. Hell, a tight end. He's easy to pay. Now, part of that is he doesn't cost much money. But I think this shows that John Mara, in a short period of time, right, we're talking 18 months, has a lot of confidence and faith in two people he hired because there's just no way. I've been around football people now for 15 years. I know the way they think. And most, besides Jerry Jones, don't feel like, yeah, let's give this guy $60, $70 million and guarantee 45 of it at that position. I don't care how famous you are, how big your name is, how big of a prospect you were. Going into year 6, it just doesn't pencil. Now, Josh Jacobs, like Saquon, a first-round pick. The difference is Saquon was a second pick, got a ton of money. We've talked ad nauseum about once this contract, if he plays on this tag, he will have averaged through his first 6 years in the NFL $8 million, which he's probably had moments when he was a little underpaid, and he's definitely had moments when he was very overpaid when he was MIA. Jacobs, also a first-round pick. Later, though, I think he was picked 24. When Ziegler and Josh McDaniels got the job last year, they made a decision in the offseason. They were not going to exercise the fifth-year option on Josh Jacobs. And I think at the time it was a risky move, though not crazy, but not necessarily a no-brainer. It's fair to say that was the wrong decision. Because like Saquon Barkley last season, if he was on the fifth-year option, there would be no arguing over this. And the number would basically be, because it changes depending on your success. He's now a multiple-time Pro Bowler. The number would be very similar. It'd be slightly over $10 million, fully guaranteed. But you wouldn't be hassling over this, are you signing the contract or not? He would just be under contract. Now, I'm not saying hindsight's 2020. It's easy to sit here on July 17th, 2023, saying what they should have done in March or April of 2022. They didn't do it. But if they got a redo, they clearly would redo that. Now, speaking of the owner and the juice that you get by having instant success. It's probably a little bit of the opposite with Mark Davis. You're not quite as confident in the two guys that you hired because of what just took place last year with the Raiders. It was really, really ugly. And now as you sit here on July 17th, you go, well, are we 100% sure Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be healthy when we take the field here in a week and a half? And you're not, because he wasn't ready in OTAs. He has a long history of being injured, and there are major question marks. I think there are also major question marks. Is this team going to be any good? Are we going to compete? And there are potentially a lot of changes if it doesn't go well. We talked about the coaches on the hot seat. I'm just talking about the roster and the potential, like, what if we suck hard enough to get one of these top quarterbacks? We don't want to be in a position where financially we're tied to a position that is somewhat easy to replace, even though I would say Josh Jacobs is a better player when fully healthy because he's a more complete player than Saquon Barkley. If you gave me 17 games of each and I knew for a fact, I'm taking Jacobs. I think Jacobs is an awesome player. But like at 25 years old on a team that barely won 6 games last year, locking myself up, my two best players right now on the team are under contract, Devontae Adams and Max Crosby. I can live with playing this thing out with Jacobs. And if we do torpedo to the bottom of the ocean and we're drafting the top 5, I want as much wiggle room as I can possibly have to attempt to get Caleb, to have salary cap space, to just do some stuff, right? And if we're good, we got this guy on a short-term deal, and it's just good business. But I think both these guys fall under the same thing. It is the smart thing to do. Every single one of you, if you had the opportunity to either give your star running back a long-term contract or go year to year, I don't think you'd hesitate in what to do. You would go year to year. But I also, like I said previously, I get why Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and these guys and Austin Eckler are up in arms. But to quote Saquon, it is what it is. So that'll kind of end this whole thing until training camp starts, and we'll see if these guys show up or not. They're not eligible to be fined, like, let's say, TJ Watt last year, who had to hold in, because technically if they don't sign, they are not under contract. So they can miss time in training camp without getting, which is now a mandatory fine, which if you hold out and you were under contract, which years ago that you were able to as an organization, if a guy was holding out and he was under contract, but he wanted a contract extension or he wanted, more guaranteed money or whatever, you could basically rescind the fines once he showed up and you figured out a contract. That's not the case anymore. It's mandatory. That's a little sneaky thing the owners did in that CBA a couple years ago. Meanwhile, the players were fighting for days off so they could, hang out with their kids. Owners just cared about money. But that'll kind of wrap up the franchise tag talk. As Netflix's first ever partnership with the NFL, Quarterback is a new docuseries brought to you through the lens of NFL quarterbacks. League MVP, Patrick Mahomes. Very polarizing Minnesota Vikings, Kirk Cousins, and journeyman Marcus Mariota. Mic'd up for the first time ever, every single game to give you unfiltered, unparalleled access on and off the field.
At this point, all that really matters is winning.
Omaha Productions, ran by Peyton Manning, linked up with NFL Films to bring you Quarterback, the docuseries. I can't wait. Let's take a look at the trailer.
I dedicate my life to football.
I love to compete.
At this point, all that really matters is winning.
White short to cousin right.
Clamp, 2-jet rip.
Quarterback is more about the mental side. They're going to come after you.
We're going to come back 6 days from now and do it again and again and again.
Okay, I wanted to dive into something, a little segment brought to you by Quarterback, the new docuseries by Netflix, which I've had an opportunity to watch a couple episodes. I think it's excellent. And I've been a staunch hater of Hard Knocks because it doesn't do anything for me anymore. I think it's it's just so team controlled that it's just propaganda from the coach and the GM, where it used to be very raw and real. We've lost that years ago. That being said, I'm going to watch it this year because of Aaron Rodgers, and quarterbacks move the needle. And this docuseries we know how awesome Mahomes is. Listen, Mariota, really good guy. I think it's been fascinating to watch Kirk Cousins, who is easily one of the most polarizing guys in the league. But once you watch the docuseries, it's impossible to not have a lot of respect for him. Two things really jump out to me. One, I guess we knew this, really good guy. Just a high-level guy. You never have to worry about anything in terms of getting in trouble, not doing everything humanly possible to just put football first, to put the team first. And clearly he tries with every ounce of his body to overachieve and maximize all the talent that God has given him to play the sport. And I saw a headline today from Dak Prescott, who said, I think he told one of the local newspapers in Dallas, I will not throw double-digit. He said, I will not throw 10 interceptions last year, because last year he led the league in interceptions. Obviously he had the 2 to end the season for the Cowboys when they played San Francisco. And I think both these guys, and I've talked about them so much because I think they're pretty interesting, right? What else are you going to say about Mahomes? What else are you going to say about Joe Burrow? They're awesome ass kickers. I know guys like Burrow and Josh Allen haven't won a Super Bowl yet, but I think we all would have to agree, not only would you take them on your team, they feel destined, if they have decent coaching and decent health around them, that they can win not just a Super Bowl, but Super Bowls in this league. And Mahomes is already one of the greatest players we've ever seen. To me, I find it the most fascinating with guys like Dak Prescott and Kirk Cousins, because it's like, are they good enough? Well, we know for a fact, and you see it with Cousins, if you get good enough pieces around him, good enough coaching, and your defense just okay, he can lead you to the playoffs. Same thing with Dak Prescott. Your team is just solid. You're going to win double-digit games and be there. And that's worth something, because when the dust settles, when both their career ends, Cousins is a lot older than Dak. Both guys, Cousins is going to make $200+ million. Dak Prescott going to make $300+ million. Financially, they are printing money. They are making so much money. Dak, so many endorsements as the leader of the Cowboys, and represent the franchise very, very well. They are guys, if you're in that building, you would clearly love a Burrow, a Josh Allen, or a Mahomes, but you know that it's very hard to get those guys. A lot of luck's involved, and you feel pretty good that you're not in the situation of probably 12 to 15 other teams that would die to have your guy. So you feel good about it. But ultimately, the goal of this sport is not to win week 1 or week 8 or even to win 12 games. It's to win Super Bowl and win playoff games. So the whole point really of pro sports is to win. And when we say win, like win when it matters. Now, it matters to win in the regular season because that puts you in position to win in the playoffs, right? So like I make fun of James Harden a lot, but for a large portion of his career, he put you in a position to make a run. Then he just always lets you down in the playoffs. And I think you see this with Dak and Kirk Cousins, like they put you in a position. Last year, the Minnesota Vikings had a home playoff game. And Kirk Cousins' statistics were fantastic. He throws a bunch of touchdowns. You watch that docuseries, toughness, you don't question it at all. He's getting peppered. He hops back up. And it's what you want. But then you get to the playoffs, same thing with Dak, just not quite good enough. And Cousins' problem, they have kind of difference. They're in different sides of the spectrum here. Dak Prescott's a really good athlete. He can make plays out of nothing because of his athleticism, his feet, and just ability to kind of ad-lib on the fly. His main problem is doesn't have the greatest arm, and it's just pretty turnover prone. And the reason I think a lot of guys are turnover prone is because when you don't have a powerful arm, it's a very catchable ball. The reason a guy plays DB is he can't catch. Most DBs, like Richard Sherman, is somewhat of an outlier. Former wide receiver, has really good hands. I would say the overwhelming majority of even good DBs have average to below hands. So when you throw Josh Allen or Mahomes, I used to see it with Kaepernick when I was going to the 49ers. When you're throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs and you're a little off, whatever, no one's catching it. But when you're throwing 91 miles an hour, these guys are pros. They can catch the ball, and that happens to Dak Prescott. So when your timing is slightly off, pick six or pick, right? Cousins, to me, whose arm has gotten better over the years, I feel better about putting in the right spot. But unlike Dak, his downfall, and you saw this at the end of the season on that last play. Now, we can argue the semantics of, well, he's going through his reads, he's doing it right, whatever, it's 4th and 7. He can't really ad-lib. if the play is not dialed up perfectly, he can't make plays because relative to NFL players, he's a below average athlete. Definitely a foot athlete. He is not very, light on his feet, to say the least. So if it's not there, he can't really make anything happen. And that gets to my overall point is these guys can get you, they've taken their teams as far as they can take them. They can win a bunch of games in the regular season. They can put up really good stats. You're going to be forced to pay them a lot of money, but you're never going to win the Super Bowl. And you could be in a lot worse spots in the league. Like you're never going to suck around them. Even a couple years ago, the Minnesota Vikings, who had a defense that was historically poor, the year Mike Zimmer, Cousins was awesome. Cousins was not the reason they sucked. But you're just not winning a Super Bowl with these guys. And it's not because of their character. Their character is A+. It's not because of their want to or their drive. It's clearly A+. It's just because the margins at the highest level, like the difference between the top 5 quarterbacks and them, is not as wide as some of us that bloviate and talk about sports. I think it comes off sometimes. It's probably a lot smaller than we realize, but that gap is usually the difference between winning and losing big games in January and ultimately a ring.